If you are here, it's because you want to learn how to read drum music. Drum music is probably one of the most confusing things out there. Unless you go to music school, there's really no reason for you to know what drum notation is. So today I'm just going to give you a couple tools that are going to help you understand drum notation, and I'm going to simplify it for you as much as I can. So let's start out with the most basic and simplest thing. Drum notation works the same way as regular notation does, but except having a definite pitch, it's just telling you what part of the drums you're gonna hit. I know, it's really weird, but that's just the way that it works. So we are still gonna use a normal staff line to write in our drum notation and how it's placed. So the snare drum goes in the middle line, the bass drum goes in the bottom space, the hi-hat goes on top of the line in the staff, so it's basically the highest one, and it usually has a little X letting you know that it's a hi-hat. And then the same thing can be found with cymbals. They're usually a little bit higher, and it's either an X or an X with a circle, depending on what the note is. And then the toms are just placed in between the snare drum and the kick drums. Now here's the thing, reading drum notation is the same thing as reading regular music except without the pitch. So if you have a quarter note, you know that when you play it on a piano, that note goes all the way to 2, right? And you can hear it, so that's why it's a little bit more easier. But with drum, that quarter note goes all the way to 2 without you hearing the resonant of it. Does that make sense? So even if you're playing a quarter note on drum set, you still have to count it from 1 to 2. So it literally fills in that space between 1 and 2, even if you can't hear it. So here's an example. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, if we were to do it on a piano, it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4. See the difference? So at times when you're reading drum notation, it almost feels like everything is just stacked one thing on top of the other, and it's really confusing at times. So the important thing to remember is that the bottom note is always going to be the kick drum. So it's always going to be on the bottom space, on the very bottom space, which is F for most people. The snare drum is going to be in the middle space. So keep that in mind. Snare drum is in the middle space. And then the hi-hat is just right on top of the line. So it's basically that top line, and it's usually going to have an X. Now there's a bunch of cymbals, there's a bunch of different accents. Like sometimes people use triangles to say, like, you know, you should play the bell on the ride, or they add like a little circle to it, or like parentheses, or they add a square. It all really depends on who's writing the music and how it's written. But most of the time, you're gonna find the cymbals and the ride and the hi-hat to be an X. So if you have trouble reading drum music or you don't understand it, the very, very fundamental thing that you need to understand with drum music, you know, this is a quarter note, but this is also a half note, right? Watch, there's no difference between quarter, half, right? But what makes the difference is counting. And the thing is, drum music is very accurate. So I'm gonna explain to you the easiest way that I learned how to play music, and I gotta give credit to my professor, Richard Hinson Jr., because he was the one that explained it to me so beautifully. I had no idea how to read music, and he was the one that taught me how to read it, and it all started with the subdivisions. So what he did was, he wrote out 16 notes like this. He started by explaining that every bar, depending on the time signature, has a certain amount of numbers assigned to it. Top of the time signature, if it's 4, it's letting you know that you have 4 spaces. And the bottom just tells you the value. So in music, there's this thing called the note pyramid that lets you know what the value of the notes are. And in 4/4, you start in the top with a whole note, which is the value is 4, and then it's followed by 2 half notes because it's 2. So that whole note is divided by 2 notes. And then from the half notes, you have quarter notes, which is 2 in each, but that means that now you have 4. And then you have the eighth notes, which means that each of those quarter notes have 2, meaning that there's 4 in just 2 beats. And then 16 notes means that there's 4 in 1 beat. And he said the way that you count 16 notes is by going 1 E and A. And then he said, take the E and the A off, and now you have 1 and now they're eighth notes. So instead of going down, he just made me backtrack and understand how everything works. Here's an exercise for you. Write down 16 notes, and then right on top of those 16 notes, 1 E and A. And then just start subtracting it and counting it. So the way that you count it is 1 E and A, 2 E and A, 3 E and A, 4 E and A. If you take out the E and the A, it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. If you take out all the 16 notes, it's just 1, 2, 3, 4. So the main thing to keep in mind is that the value of the notes are dependent on the time signature. So if you have a 4/4,
that means that the quarter note is the one that dictates the value of the measure.
So if you have a 6/8, time signature. It means that the top of the staff is telling you that there's 6 spaces, and the 8th note is the one that takes 1 beat. It changes the value. So in 6/8, the 8th note is the one that takes the place of a quarter note in a 4/4 measure, if that makes sense. So that means that you have to put down 6 8th notes for it to fill up the measure. The tricky part about drum notating is that you have to play everything at the same time and or it's divided. Drum notating is really helpful in that sense because it's just letting you know what parts and extremities you need to use. And the staff is just letting you know where you need to play it. Let me just show you what a normal groove looks like on drum set, and I'm labeling them so that way you know where everything is. Most drum books have a little legend at the beginning of it, kind of like a little guide letting you know where everything goes, because every drummer writes things differently. Okay, well that's it for today's video. It's not a really complicated video. I'm just trying to make this as easy as I can for you. But I hope this helps you. Leave any questions or comments underneath the video. Please do not forget to subscribe. If you love this channel and you love the content that I'm putting out, please subscribe, help the channel out. And yeah, that's it for today. All right, love y'all. Peace.